It started as one of those seemingly ordinary moments that celebrities often share without a second thought. A quiet morning, soft sunlight pouring through the tall windows of a luxury hotel in Dubai, a neatly arranged breakfast table, and Yaman sitting calmly in front of it. No dramatic captions. No long explanations. Just a simple image that, at first glance, looked almost boring. But for fans who have learned to read between the lines, this breakfast photo was anything but ordinary. Because sometimes, the loudest truths are hidden in the smallest details. And this time, one detail stood out immediately: there was only one plate. Not two. Not a shared setup. Just one. For a man whose relationship status has been under constant scrutiny, that single plate became the spark that reignited a firestorm of questions Yaman has tried to keep buried. The timing alone made it impossible to ignore. Dubai. Luxury hotel. Morning hours. And yet, no sign of Sara Bluma anywhere. Not in the reflection. Not in the background. Not even in the subtle details fans are known for spotting within seconds. For months, the narrative around Can and Sara has been carefully curated through controlled appearances, selective posts, and strategic silence. Every move has been measured. Every image analyzed. So when Kim posted that breakfast moment, many expected it to confirm togetherness, intimacy, or at least the illusion of it. Instead, it did the opposite. The table was too clean. Too untouched. No second cup of coffee. No extra cutlery. No feminine presence hinted through personal items. Nothing that suggested another person had even been there moments earlier. And this wasn't just casual speculation. Fans who have followed Yaman for years know his habits. They know how he frames photos. They know how much he reveals without saying a word. In past relationships, shared breakfasts were obvious. Multiple plates appeared naturally, sometimes even unintentionally. A sleeve in the corner of the frame. A second glass. A mirror reflection that gave everything away. This time, there was nothing. And that absence spoke volumes. Within minutes, social media lit up. Comments began pouring in, not with excitement, but with confusion. Why only one plate? Wasn't Sara supposed to be with him in Dubai? Did he forget to hide it, or did he want us to see this? These weren't haters stirring drama. These were loyal fans, the same ones who defended him when rumors got ugly, the same ones who believed every official explanation. But now, they were questioning everything. Because the image didn't align with the story they'd been told. What made it even more unsettling was Can's silence afterward. No clarification. No follow-up story. No playful comment to shut the rumors down. Just silence. And in Yaman's world, silence is never accidental. Especially not when he knows exactly how closely he's watched. Especially not when a single detail could undo months of carefully maintained perception. Some fans argued that maybe Sara was asleep. Others suggested she simply wasn't photographed. But those explanations began to fall apart when people noticed something else. The breakfast setup looked untouched beyond one person's use. One napkin folded. One chair pulled out. The other chair remained perfectly aligned with the table, as if no one had sat there at all. This wasn't a rushed snapshot. It was composed. Intentional. And that raised a far more uncomfortable question. What if this wasn't a mistake? What if Can wanted this detail to be seen? Because if Sara had been there, hiding her presence would have been easy. But allowing the absence to be this visible felt almost deliberate. As if Can was quietly correcting a narrative without having to say a word. The idea unsettled fans even more. Because if Sara wasn't there in Dubai, then where was she? And more importantly, why had everyone assumed she would be? That assumption didn't come from nowhere. It came from weeks of speculation, indirect hints, and carefully framed moments that suggested closeness without ever confirming it. And now, one breakfast plate was threatening to dismantle all of it. this wasn't just about a meal. It was about what it represented. Independence. Distance. Or perhaps something more complicated that Yaman wasn't ready to explain yet. As fans zoomed in, rewatched, compared old photos, and debated endlessly, one thing became clear. This wasn't going to fade away quietly. Because once people start noticing what's missing, they can't stop. And this was only the beginning. As the hours passed, the conversation around that single breakfast photo didn't slow down. It intensified. Fans weren't just reacting emotionally anymore. They were dissecting it with almost forensic precision. Screenshots were zoomed in. Old hotel breakfast photos from Yaman's past trips were pulled up for comparison. Patterns began to emerge, and once they did, it became harder to dismiss the theory that this moment revealed more than Ken ever intended to say out loud. In previous relationships, Ken had never been this careful or this exposed. When he was with someone, even discreetly, the signs were always there. A second chair slightly angled. 2 cups with different drink choices. A subtle reflection in polished cutlery. This time everything screamed singularity. One person. One presence. One morning routine that belonged to Ken alone. And that contrast is what truly unsettled longtime followers. Because it didn't feel accidental. It felt clean. Deliberate. Almost symbolic. The absence of chaos was the message. And then came the second wave of speculation, the kind that digs deeper and asks not just what is visible, but why it's visible at all. Why post this particular moment? Why now? Yaman knows his audience better than anyone. He knows how quickly a simple image can explode into headlines. He knows that Dubai, luxury hotels, and morning intimacy are a dangerous combination when your personal life is already under a microscope. So the choice to share a breakfast scene without any trace of another person felt like a statement disguised as neutrality. Some fans began suggesting that this was Ken reclaiming control. Instead of denying rumors directly, he let the image speak. Instead of issuing a clarification, he allowed the speculation to unfold naturally. And what it revealed was uncomfortable for those who were convinced that Sara Bluma was firmly by his side. Because if she were there, truly there, why leave room for doubt at all? The theory that Sara might have been in the room but simply not shown began to weaken as more details were noticed. The room service layout was minimal, not expanded. Hotels in Dubai are known for generous breakfast spreads when more than one guest is present. Extra plates are standard. Additional settings appear automatically. Yet here, everything was scaled perfectly for one. Even the seating arrangement suggested solitude. One chair pulled out slightly, the other untouched, pushed neatly under the table as if it hadn't been used all morning. This wasn't the aftermath of 2 people eating together. It was the setup of one person enjoying breakfast alone. And then there was Ken's expression. Calm. Almost distant. Not the relaxed glow of someone sharing a quiet morning with a partner, but the composed stillness of someone comfortable in their own space. That detail didn't go unnoticed either. Fans commented that his body language felt different. Less guarded, but also less intimate. As if he wasn't performing closeness for anyone else's benefit. As if he was simply existing, without needing to prove anything. And that possibility shook the narrative even more. Because if Ken wasn't trying to present a relationship, then what exactly had people been holding on to all this time? The idea that Sara and Ken were inseparable had largely been built on assumptions, not confirmations. Hints instead of facts. Silence instead of statements. And now, that silence was being interpreted in a new way. Not as protection, but as distance. Still, Ken didn't intervene. No story explaining the moment. No laughing emoji to downplay the rumors. No repost of Sara to balance the image. Just nothing. And in the world of celebrity communication, nothing is often louder than denial. The longer he stayed quiet, the more the theory gained strength. This breakfast wasn't just a casual post. It was a crack in a carefully constructed image. And once a crack appears, people can't help but look through it. Because they know what comes next is rarely what they were prepared to see. By the next day, the conversation had moved beyond fan pages and into wider gossip circles. What began as a quiet observation had turned into a full-blown narrative shift. Headlines didn't even need to exaggerate anymore. The image did the work on its own. Only one plate. Dubai breakfast raises questions. Where is Sara? Each phrasing circled back to the same uncomfortable conclusion. Something about the story people believed no longer added up. And once doubt enters the room, it changes how every past detail is remembered. Fans started revisiting earlier moments that had once been interpreted as proof of closeness between Yaman and Sara Bluma. Posts that were once seen as subtle confirmations now felt strangely vague. Captions that seemed romantic before suddenly read like careful wording designed to avoid commitment. The breakfast photo didn't exist in isolation anymore. It became the lens through which everything else was reevaluated. And under that lens, the relationship narrative looked far less solid than many wanted to admit. One particularly striking point fans raised was timing. This wasn't just any trip. Dubai had been associated with privacy, reset, and emotional distance for Ken in the past. Whenever things felt complicated, he disappeared there. So seeing him in Dubai again, alone at breakfast, sent a quiet but powerful signal. If this trip had been about romance, about shared space and intimacy, wouldn't that have been reflected even subtly? Instead, the image suggested separation. Not dramatic. Not angry. But intentional. A pause. A boundary. And then there was Sara's silence. While Ken's quiet had always been part of his public persona, Sara's absence during this moment felt different. No parallel post. No indirect hint. No shared location. In previous situations, even when staying low-key, there had been traces. This time, there were none. And for fans who closely tracked timing and patterns, that absence mattered just as much as the single plate on the table. Some began asking a harder question. What if the relationship hadn't ended suddenly, but had slowly faded long before this breakfast? What if what people were seeing now wasn't a breakup moment, but the first undeniable proof that the distance had already been there for a while? That idea resonated more than expected. It explained the controlled appearances. The careful silence. The lack of spontaneous moments that once defined Ken's past relationships. It reframed everything as maintenance rather than connection. And that reframing changed how fans felt. Not angry. Not betrayed. Just unsettled. Because it suggested that the truth had been quietly present all along, hidden in plain sight. The breakfast photo simply removed the final layer of illusion. Still, some fans resisted. They argued that privacy doesn't equal absence, that relationships don't need to be displayed to be real. And that's true. But Yaman's public life has never existed in a vacuum. He understands perception. He understands symbolism. And when someone so aware chooses to share a moment that contradicts an existing narrative, it's rarely meaningless. Especially when he lets the reaction unfold without correction. As discussions grew more intense, one idea began to surface repeatedly. This wasn't exposure. It was release. A subtle way of stepping away from an expectation without having to explain or justify it. No announcement. No confrontation. Just an image that quietly says this is where I am right now. And for many fans, that realization hit harder than any dramatic confession could have. Because it felt real. Unfiltered. And unprotected. By this point, the breakfast photo had stopped being about Dubai, food, or even Sara alone. It had become a symbol, one that forced fans to confront something deeper about Yaman himself. For years, people had projected stories onto him, filling the gaps he intentionally left open. But this time, the gap was different. It wasn't an empty space begging to be imagined. It was a clear shape defined by what wasn't there. And that distinction mattered. Because absence, when it's this precise, starts to feel intentional rather than accidental. What made this stage of the story even more intriguing was how calmly Ken appeared to move on afterward. No emotional follow-up. No dramatic shift in tone. His subsequent posts, when they came, were neutral. Almost detached. Work-related. Controlled. As if the breakfast moment had already served its purpose and there was nothing left to add. That calmness unsettled fans more than chaos ever could. People expect drama from breakups, especially when public figures are involved. But what they were witnessing instead was composure. And composure often comes after a decision has already been made. Fans began to interpret the breakfast image not as a reveal, but as closure. A quiet marker between what was assumed and what was real. The more people discussed it, the clearer it became that this wasn't about proving Sara wasn't there. It was about showing that Ken was alone by choice. And that difference carries emotional weight. Choosing solitude in a city like Dubai, in a setting designed for indulgence and shared experiences, sends a subtle but strong message. It suggests clarity, or at least the pursuit of it. Another detail resurfaced in discussions. Ken's history with controlled narratives. In the past, when rumors threatened to spin out of control, he had intervened quickly. A short comment. A smile. A single line that redirected attention. This time, there was none of that. And fans who knew his patterns recognized the shift immediately. Silence, in this context, didn't mean confusion. It meant resolve. It meant letting the truth exist without decoration. Sara's continued absence from the moment only reinforced that interpretation. The lack of overlap, of shared timing, of even indirect acknowledgement began to feel less like coincidence and more like separation. Not necessarily dramatic, but firm. And that realization softened some of the harsher reactions. Instead of anger, many fans expressed understanding. Relationships don't always end with a bang. Sometimes they dissolve quietly, leaving behind only small signs that make sense in hindsight. The breakfast plate became one of those signs. Simple. Ordinary. And yet impossible to ignore once seen. It didn't accuse. It didn't explain. It simply existed. And in doing so, it forced people to confront a truth they may not have been ready for. That Yaman, at least in that moment, was choosing himself over performance. Privacy over illusion. And that choice, subtle as it was, felt more honest than any statement ever could. By now, the question wasn't whether Sara had been there or not. The question was why people needed her to be there in the first place. And the answer to that revealed more about expectations than about reality. Because sometimes, the most revealing moments aren't the ones where everything is shown, but the ones where nothing extra is added at all. By the time the discussion reached its peak, the narrative had fully shifted. This was no longer a debate about hotel breakfast logistics or accidental framing. It had turned into a larger reflection on perception, projection, and the quiet ways celebrities sometimes tell the truth without ever saying it. The single plate in Dubai had done what interviews, statements, and rumors never could. It stripped the story down to its most basic form. One man. One morning. One moment of unshared space. And in that simplicity, a powerful message had emerged. Fans began to realize that the most revealing part of the situation wasn't what Yaman showed, but what he didn't bother to hide. There was no attempt to soften the image. No strategic counterbalance. No sudden appearance from Sara to calm the waters. The lack of reaction itself became the conclusion. It suggested acceptance. Not defeat. Not drama. But acceptance of where things stood. And that realization changed the emotional tone of the conversation entirely. Instead of chasing new clues, many fans began reflecting on why this moment felt so significant. The answer was uncomfortable but clear. Because it felt real. For the first time in a long while, there was no performance layered on top of the image. No couple narrative to protect. No expectation to fulfill. Just Yaman, existing in a way that didn't require validation from anyone else. And for a public figure whose life has been shaped by attention, that kind of authenticity is rare. Some fans even suggested that this breakfast moment marked a turning point. Not just in a relationship narrative, but in how Yaman wants to be seen moving forward. Less as a romantic symbol shaped by speculation, and more as an individual setting boundaries. The idea resonated deeply. It explained the restraint. The silence. The choice to let people interpret rather than correct. Because sometimes, allowing people to arrive at the truth themselves is the most respectful way to end a chapter. Sara Blooma's role in this story, while central to the speculation, gradually faded into the background. Not out of dismissal, but because the focus had shifted. This wasn't about blaming or exposing anyone. It was about recognizing distance when it appears, even if it arrives quietly. And that quietness became the defining feature of the entire situation. No scandal. No confrontation. Just a moment that gently but firmly reset expectations. As days passed, the intensity of the debate softened, but the conclusion remained. Fans didn't forget the image. They integrated it. It became one of those reference points people return to when future rumors arise. A reminder that sometimes, the truth doesn't announce itself loudly. It sits calmly on a table, in plain sight, waiting to be noticed. And perhaps that's exactly why this moment lingered. Because it respected the audience enough not to manipulate them. It trusted them to see what was there and what wasn't. In the end, Yaman didn't need to confirm or deny anything. The breakfast did that for him. One plate. One chair. One quiet morning in Dubai that revealed more than words ever could. And as the story settled, one thing became undeniable. Whatever chapter people thought they were witnessing before, it had already ended by the time that plate was set.